This is Section 1904. It is Wednesday. I'm Darren. He's John. Got a guest lined up today, so this is going to be a podcast where we're pretty much focused on one thing and one thing alone, and that thing is going to be San Diego Football Club. We will spend a couple of minutes here on the Padres. Padres will play game number 3 against the Diamondbacks tonight. It was a wild one. If you're going to spend 4 hours watching a baseball game, you might as well be watching a win. That's the way I look at these things. It was a 4-hour extra inning baseball game. Little bit of everything. It's hard to even remember who it was that started that one, but it was a wild night on the Discord. It was a wild night on social media. It was a wild night at whatever it is that they're calling that ballpark just inside Phoenix, Arizona, where it was 111 degrees yesterday. John, I don't even know how to describe it. We're not going to spend a ton of time going through line by line of the box score, but I was reminded of a story that we told here on Section 1904. It was a story that was told to me by Jed Hoyer when the Red Sox were converting Derek Lowe from a closer, an all-star closer who led the league in saves, to a starter. And then on the first day of the regular season, the new closer, Ugi Urbina, blew the save, and Theo Epstein turned the horror, and he's like, of course he did. And that's the way I looked at a couple of nights there in Arizona, whether it was the starter or the reliever. The pieces that came over for Leo DeVries, of course they did in their first couple of appearances in meaningful games. Of course they did. Just got to the way these things go sometimes. But all's well that ends well, I suppose, or at least until tonight at 6:40 in Arizona.
That was a surprising mention of Ugueth Urbina, with no mention of what happened after his baseball career ended, which is good. Yeah, Yu Darvish started that game, if you forgot. Mike Shildt got to use his entire complement of, I guess, 5 horsemen out of the bullpen. Didn't go particularly well. And yes, I laughed very hard last night because I forget which game it was that I mentioned that the game was like one of the longest games of the year for the Padres. And you said, John, I'm so glad you mentioned it so I didn't have to be the old man complaining about how long the game is. And last night I heard Jesse Agler say to Mark Grant, this is now the longest Padres game of the year. And I was like, well, Darren didn't have to say it. There's Jesse Agler pointing it out. Yeah, it was a very long game. There was a lot of relievers. And the old grit squad, Darren, just kept fighting back till they left with a win. Gritty as they can be.
Yeah. I will just say, as a quick aside, I really enjoy the broadcast with Jesse Agler and Mark Graham.
Thought it was great.
That's
so
not
good.
Commentary on any other thing. I'm just simply stating that I mean, we don't have to be political here. We can just say whatever the hell we want to say. And I will tell you, I'm not saying anything against Don. I'm not saying anything against Tony. I'm just saying I like the broadcast with Jesse Agler and with Mark Graham.
They genuinely seem to make each other giggle quite a lot, and I love that. Like they genuinely seem to enjoy having a 4-hour conversation with one another on live television, and that comes across and makes the whole thing very enjoyable. There was a number of times last night that I was like, this is a really good broadcast. Which again, I like Don and Mud too. I think that's great. I like a lot of the combinations we get on TV and radio covering the Padres, but Jesse and Mud were particularly good last night.
Yeah, I thought so too. All right. So, of course he did with Mason Miller, I did appreciate the stat that was floating around last night. I'm sure most people have seen it, but the fact that was 104 mile per hour pitch, and that is in the StatCast era, the highest velocity pitch ever recorded that went for a home run in baseball since 2008, I think it is.
And he pulled it.
Yeah, that is, I don't know how you do that other than to say, I just don't. I mean, you could discuss location and that he was timing it and all that. I mean, he hit 104 mile per hour pitch. I mean,
really far too.
You go, wow, okay. I don't know. I don't know that you can time these things. I know they're really good hitters, but that's 104. It's never happened before, at least in this era, that somebody has gone deep on a pitch with that velocity. That
might never happen again.
It might not. It might not. So give Gurriel credit, I guess. I don't know how much time people want on Yu Darvish today. I don't know. It was I wasn't
scared. Like he wasn't dominant, but I continue to watch him and go, there's still the bones of a good pitcher here somewhere. And I still think he's, sharpening his tools after many, many months of not really pitching in professional baseball.
I don't have any answers about, why we didn't see Hearn. I don't know. Nobody seemed to ask that question.
Really? No one asked it? And
I don't think anybody asked post game.
That's all anyone was talking about pregame. Why the hell why did you trade for this guy and just, give his spot in the order to Jose Iglesias? I don't know. I guess Iglesias had to play third because, Manny probably is dealing with something, but not sure exactly what. I don't know. We'll let the reporters try to get to the bottom of that, I suppose. What else can you really do? Nothing.
So, yeah. Yesterday's podcast, we talked about, I guess just to put a wrap on yesterday's podcast before we move on, about the ballpark rankings. And this made its rounds yesterday on social media. I think it was funny. I think it was us trying to be funny with it. But I had a few people who hit back and said, wait a minute, there's another poll here that ranked Petco Park number 1. I'm like, okay, you got us. Well, I don't know. But is that really, what are the standards of this claim when we're just finding random pages on the internet that say that Petco Park is the number 1 ballpark? What are the standards for this claim when you're literally using it to ask for thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of more dollars from your fans? What are the standards of this claim? I don't mind them using the claim. That's the thing that didn't show up on the social media clip yesterday. Yeah. I don't mind them using it. I would use it. I think it's the best ballpark. There you go.
I mean, I haven't been to all of them, but yeah.
Here, Eric Grupner, use that in your your next pitch for more money from season ticket holders. The Section 1904 podcast thinks it's the America's number 1 ballpark. Would you agree?
It's at least Section 1904's number 1 ballpark.
Section 1904 thinks it's America's number 1 ballpark. But, again, it is funny. And as we said, we gave you the backstory on it. They won the number 1 ballpark thing back in 2016. And I don't know how often they win it because there's, like we said yesterday, 6 or 7 of these things that float around on the internet. Not you don't get anything for this, right? People understand that. You don't get a trophy for this. You don't get a flag for this. You don't get anything. You don't get a plaque. You just get to put it in an email when you're making the case that you should spend more money on Padre tickets. That's all.
Yeah. And I think it is a little bit of a tourist attraction too. People are like, oh, I get to go to the best ballpark in all of Bay. Look, America's number 1 ballpark. But it's all kind of made up. A few weeks ago, maybe a few months ago at this point, my wife had to fly in and out of the Long Beach airport. And she was sending me pictures and videos going look how weird this airport is. The terminal's basically outside and you go inside to get to your gate. And she was telling me all these weird idiosyncrasies about it. And she said at one point, she was like, there's a big tagline on one of the walls that says Long Beach Airport, America's coolest airport or the coolest airport in America or whatever. And she sent that to me. And my joke in response was there a vote? Did I miss it? And it's it doesn't matter. You just say whatever you want to say. It's what matters is that the people that are there think they're at America's number 1 ballpark. It's all that matters.
And we live in America's finest city.
We do. There was a vote, apparently. We missed it.
Again? Won it again.
Every year, Darren.
Win it every year. Yeah. San Diego's favorite podcast, Section 1904.
There you go.
The other thing I will say that I do think is a little more alarming than we probably gave it credit for. When I went back and read the email to season ticket members, that you included 11 player names, that you included the name of your manager, and that this was signed by the CEO, Eric Grupner, H.A. Preller's name being omitted from that, it just is hard to think that was just carelessness for me. That's all. I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe they got a lot of things happening. Maybe Preller doesn't want his name in this stuff. All of these things are possibilities. I really haven't spent a ton of time. I did ask around a little bit. Somebody said, how often it'd be nice not to feel like these things are just mistakes, that it was just a little bit of oversight. All I will say is I do remember an awful lot of things that would go out publicly that were signed by Peter Seidler And every one of those things included our team, Eric Grupner, and AJ Preller. Eric Grupner, AJ Preller. I do remember that because these are the kind of things that stand out to me. That's why it stands out to me that Preller's name wasn't included in the email to the season ticket holders. You figured out a way to get 11 different player names in there, the name of your manager, and Eric Grupner signed this. And you didn't mention the president of baseball operations. You didn't mention the general manager of the team. That just, I'm going to have a tough time believing that was just some carelessness, but I suppose it's a possibility. That's all.
I don't have the picture in front of me, and what I would really like to do is compare that email to past years' emails to see if AJ Preller has been included in them. But
he has by Peter Seidler, as I just said. I remember these things because they stand out to me.
But the question that I actually had like last night was, okay, it's weird that Preller's left out of there. I totally agree with you. Is John Seidler mentioned?
No.
I mean,
but who is he? I mean, what does he have to do with any of this?
No, but that's the point. Like this is an opportunity to communicate to the season ticket holders that John Seidler is now the whatever chairman of the board or whatever his actual title is. And, you know, the man with the purse strings, the man running everything. Like this is a fan base that fell in love with Peter Seidler. And now Peter's dead. And, you know, we had weeks, if not months, of like, who's John Seidler? No one's seen a picture of him. Are we sure he's at all these games? You're not going to take an opportunity to squeeze his name in there and be like, John Seidler is excited for the championship roster that we've built. And he okayed the additional payroll and like, not going to do any of that either. It felt weird.
Well, if it's not coming from him, then I don't expect Eric Grupner to do that.
I mean,
somebody joked to me last night, all the attention and praise that AJ Preller got around the trade deadline, which, there's been a little bit of both. But, Grupner probably feels like, hey, like that should have been the praise for me. Somebody who understands that dynamic internally. But no, I mean, if it's not coming from John Seidler, I don't know. Why would you include him more than you'd include anybody else?
Well, that was the other thing.
In ownership.
Like, you could have just added him to the signature, signed from Eric Grupner and John Seidler. Like it seemed, I don't know. It's, as I mentioned, I think at the beginning of the baseball season, it doesn't really feel like there's any other team in baseball where the fans are exposed to like the CEO as much as this one. Mm-hmm. And that just continues to be a very strange dynamic.
All right. Padres will play later tonight. Nestor Cortez will probably spend some more time on the Padres coming up on Thursday. Because
I love Nestor Cortez.
Well, we'll see. He's going to be making his debut. We did see the roster move from yesterday. Maybe we'll have some more answers to some of the questions, but yeah, wild one. Just a wild game. So there's a website called Backheeled.com. And when I tell you that this has been essential part of my preparation for the SDFC broadcasts, I cannot say that loud enough. It has been essential because, they have done some great work there. It's a website that some of you I know have heard of because I've seen some of their stories linked on our Discord channel and on social media. It's a website we're going to meet its creator, who also is a writer, reporter, podcaster, sort of does a little bit of everything. He has written a story, How San Diego Football Club is Dominating MLS and Making a Case as the Best Expansion Team in History. A point that I've been hesitant to amplify too much because I wouldn't want to say that if they don't become the best expansion club of all time, that this is somehow a failure, but it is an interesting goal. With 4 more wins, they will surpass St. Louis's record. They will surpass LAFC's points record for an expansion season. So these things are there with 9 games to go. So we're going to talk to Joe Lowery here in a moment. Just a quick thought. I got through about a half. I'll watch the other half later today. SDFC against Mazatlán. I don't know that playing spoilers is still a thing, especially in a tournament like this. I don't know if that's a motivator for Mike Ivadas in the pregame, but they did play spoilers. As a matter of fact, they got Mazatlán eliminated from this tournament. Dominated in terms of just some of the statistics, 75-25, outshot them 17-3. Everybody seemingly got a reasonable amount of minutes for me. Anybody in terms of who you're going to be hoping to contribute coming up on Saturday. Chucky started, and I saw a couple of questions as to why Chucky would start this game. I think it's important for him to start against Mexican League teams. I do. I think that that's something that he wants to do. Obviously that's where it all started for him. So I do think that that is personally important for him, not to the point where you're going to be reckless with Chucky Lozano, but he got 60 whatever minutes. I think the guys that played 90 are probably the guys, that you're not so sure. Outside of now, David or David, I've been told it's David Vasquez, but he had an assist to Ani Valakari in this game that was so great. So good to see him. Pedro Soma got into the match. So I thought it was just a good night. I thought it was just a good an easy watch. I thought they played really, really well. I'm glad that they went. Well, I don't want to say that they went for it. I'm just glad that they didn't abandon who they were to say, hey, listen, this is a meaningless thing for us, and we're going to treat it as such. I thought it was a really positive night for SDFC.
Yeah, it turned out to be, I think yesterday I said I'm excited to see some of these young players get opportunities that they maybe wouldn't otherwise get. It was good to see CJ Dos Santos back out there, even with the face mask. Be very interesting to see if he's playing against Sporting KC or if it's Pablo Cisniego.
And McVeigh, McVeigh was back out there, which was a little bit of a surprise to me.
McVeigh was back out there. He played about a half. Yeah, I wanted to make sure that Chucky didn't play too many minutes and Godoy didn't play too many minutes, and they didn't. They played 50, 60 minutes. That pass from Vasquez to Valakari for the second goal, which I love Valakari coming on and scoring 2 goals in like 10 minutes.
Love it.
Every time that happens, it feels like you're just taking over, especially because he did. It's the only 2 goals scored in the whole game. But it felt like a takeover and it was fun. But the Vasquez pass was beautiful. I don't know if you saw the shot, like the wide shot of he hit the pass and knew it was a goal and just kind of stopped moving because he's like, well, that's a goal. And it was such a cool baller confidence move from like a kid who's so young and kind of inexperienced. But I think that was led into by a beautiful pass from Pedro Soma. So it was like new guy, right to Valakari, playing like kind of a different role than what he's been playing lately. And those were 3 guys that I was like, that was practiced. Even though they haven't been here very long and they haven't been in these roles very often on an MLS team or on SDFC in a real game, like you could tell that was a whole move and play that they had worked on, and it worked beautifully and it was perfect. And I really want to highlight that. But yeah, I thought they played well. In the first half, I kind of had this thought going into it. I was like, they're not going to try that hard. And then right out of the gate, you could tell that this match like still meant a lot to Chucky. And I'm not saying like he's the captain of the team or anything like that, but I think the fact that you could tell that it mattered so much to Chucky made everyone else go, all right, we're in this too. If he's going to try that hard, we're going to try that hard. And that really raised everyone's level. And I think it turned into a good game by SDFC against a team that didn't look like they were that bad. Looks like a pretty good team. And SDFC just like, I don't know. You didn't go to the game, right? You just watched it on TV. The TV broadcasters, I think maybe more in the first half than the second half, were just like amazed at the possession. At one point, it was like 90-10 was the possession. They were just like, "This is insane. How do you beat this team?" And it was like, "Yeah." Even playing like kind of half squad, SDFC was awesome as per usual.
Yeah, I don't know what did or didn't motivate Mazatlán in this one. And I'm not trying to take anything away from the performance from SDFC because, they played great and they, connected on a billion passes in this one. But, I don't know what was going on there. But they had a lot to lose and they lost and they're out. They're eliminated. They can't advance. So anyhow, Tijuana will be going up against Seattle. I rattled off a couple of the interesting matches. I think Miami and Pumas is tonight. But as you said it, the announcers seemingly were in awe. There was a story in The Guardian recently about how, if you like beautiful, free-flowing soccer, football, then, SDFC might be the MLS club for you. So that was really nice to see last week. There's another piece at Backheeled.com. And let's get to our conversation here with Joe Lowery. Again, this website is, I'm not saying this because he's coming on the show. He's coming on the show because we like the website. So let's get to it here because he has written, and he's been following this for a while. He interviewed Tyler Heaps before the season started at the Coachella Valley Invitational, which was really a helpful interview for me because I learned a lot about how they built this thing and FC Nordsjælland, et cetera. So let's get to our conversation with Backheeled creator, reporter extraordinaire, Joe Lowery. How San Diego Football Club is dominating Major League Soccer and making a case as the best expansion team in history. That is the headline. You can find it at backheeled.com. The creator, the jack of all trades, the podcaster, the reporter, the analyst, he does it all. He is Joe Lowery, who joins us on Section 1904. Joe, thank you very much for taking the time to do it. And congratulations on a great website, by the way.
Darren, thank you. Thank you for having me. Checks in the mail on that, all those very, very nice things in the bio that you read out. I appreciate it.
Well, the check has literally been in the mail for me. Can I just start by issuing you a personal thank you? Because, I got the gig with SDFC kind of late. I won't go into too much detail about exactly all the goings on behind the scenes, but I got the gig with SDFC kind of late. So for me, having a general awareness of Major League Soccer, but not knowing in depth about roster profiles, things like that, needing to learn the rules. When I was preparing for this gig, I found your website and I said, this thing is an absolute home run if you're a Major League Soccer fan, if you're new to it, if you've been around it for a while, because getting all the season previews, finding the interviews that you've done that have been incredibly relevant for me in my preparation for these broadcasts, I don't know where I would be. And I'm not kidding when I say this. I don't know where I would have been without your website because it is really, really unique. So I just want to say thank you for all the hard work that you've done and all the info.
Yeah, that's really kind, and I'm glad that it resonates. I love this sport. I love seeing it and chronicling its growth in this country. It means a lot to me, and so I like doing those things. I think the goal is for them to do exactly what you just described, to help people who are at various levels of being in touch with MLS and soccer in the United States to tap in and to get something from it. So I'm glad that it resonated.
Can I just follow that up? Because now I'm curious. Why? Why do you love MLS so much? What started this?
Yeah, so my love for MLS kind of stems from a love for soccer, which stems from just a love for sports in general. Growing up, sports nerd, not great at any of them, so had always looked to understand and experience them in other ways too. I mean, I play casually, but I'm no good. And I'd always been fascinated by the strategy of sports, right? The NFL was sort of like maybe my first love, basketball as well. But soccer is so free-flowing, right? There is so much complexity to soccer, and it is unique compared to those other sports, even though they do share some similarities. So I love soccer, and I love the story, really, of soccer in the United States as well, right? I mean, as somebody who writes for a good chunk of my living, the stories matter to me too. And soccer in the U.S. still sort of feels like this question of where is it going to land? What is it going to be? Who is it going to impact? And how is it going to compare to what happens in the rest of the world? And MLS is a big player in that puzzle. So it's not just MLS for me. It's USL, which San Diego has a history with. I'm out in Phoenix. We have a USL team out here. It's the U.S. men's and women's national teams and the other domestic leagues here in the U.S. So it is a lot of those things. But MLS has become, through various circumstances and passions of mine, the thing that I spend the most time on the work front thinking about and talking about.
Yeah, I will say I did notice that you do some work with Phoenix Rising, and even from my days with San Diego Loyal, I did not hold that against you. I know we had that manufactured rivalry, but I was like, man, this is such a great website. And then I found your profiles on Blue Sky or on Twitter. I was like, oh, Phoenix Rising analyst.
Maybe it's not so great. Maybe it's just mediocre. I will say, there's some blood that goes in those directions. Not for me. Like I'm certainly, I'm a Phoenix guy, but I'm unbiased on that front. But there's a lot of the Southwestern Pacific rivalry that does pop up for sure.
So we have a lot of our listeners here and people that interact with us that are new to the sport. It's not just that they're new to Major League Soccer like I am. I've been following the sport for a long time. And, it's not that, people are getting used to what this is and how this works. And I will say, it is hard. Major League Soccer is a little bit more complex than some of the other leagues around the world when it comes to TAM, GAM, et cetera. How has this even changed in the time that you've been doing Backheeled and in the amount of time that you've been covering Major League Soccer? How has this sport evolved to the point where we are today here with 30 teams in the league?
Yeah, I mean, the top line for me on MLS, Backheeled launched in the summer of 2022. That was when we launched the morning after the Seattle Sounders won, then called the CONCACAF Champions League, right? Like our continent's version of the UEFA Champions League that is the most famous non-World Cup soccer tournament on the planet, right? Backheeled launched one day after that, and the very first article that I had written for the site was how the Sounders had done it, right? How had Seattle gotten to the top of North American soccer? And I think that's sort of fitting for a way to answer your question, Darren, of, I think the biggest change for MLS has been that it's gotten better, right? I mean, there are still a lot of roster rules that is more unique. That's not possible, I guess. That more unique doesn't really work as a phrase, but it is. In America, we have lots of roster rules across our leagues, right? The NBA with birds rights, and the NFL, I mean, restrictive, all these things, right? But soccer doesn't have that so much. Although we are starting to see things like profit and sustainability rules coming into play over in Europe and in the Premier League, and those being more talking points because clubs are often not in good financial situations unless they're owned by literal nations in the Middle East. So we're seeing more leagues, more soccer leagues, start to become more American as time goes on. But MLS is still a league with Byzantine roster rules, and there's a lot of things to understand. But really, the top line is that the league has improved. And San Diego's a part of this, right? Teams that are coming in with clear identities of how they want to build their projects, of what they want to be. The talent level has increased as teams continue to spend a little bit more, but also as MLS becomes more ingrained in the global transfer market, where you have players leaving for 8-figure fees, like leaving for 10, 15, more than that $1 million, and players coming in for some of those fees as well. Not that spending is highly correlated. In fact, it's not correlated with success in Major League Soccer, but you see more and more names coming in as the league continues to become a bigger player. There's a lot of work to do, right? If MLS wants to do the thing it always says of, hey, we want to be the league of choice. That's the phrase that Commissioner Don Garber often uses, that MLS executives use. MLS executive Nelson Rodriguez spoke to ESPN's Jeff Carlisle at some point earlier this year, and said, in 30 years, we want to be better than the Premier League. There's a lot of work for them to do if they want to back up that stuff. And there have been a lot of claims that haven't been backed up over the years. So, grains of salt need to be taken there. But MLS has improved. The league is more interesting tactically, narratively, stylistically, talent-wise than it has ever been. Certainly since I've started doing this, but than it has ever been. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. It is just a matter of how quickly that trend continues rather than whether it will.
I have a follow-up there. And I've been wondering why this year, following San Diego FC in their expansion year, why this doesn't feel like I'm following an expansion team. When I talk to other people in San Diego, and I pay attention to all the expansion that has happened in the big four American sports over the last 30 years, and I think the difference I've finally settled on is those cities were paying attention to those leagues and going, I wish we could get one of those. With San Diego FC showing up here, it's a lot of people who never paid attention to MLS before. So they're seeing a new team, but really they're seeing the new league. And there's almost not this feeling of we're an expansion team. It's almost this feeling of there's this new league in San Diego. How fun. And you kind of just nailed it. And in your write-up that went up yesterday, you tried to do some of this, but adding the context of where this team fits in historically with MLS is both good to say for San Diego people, hey, this is really impressive, this is special, whatever. But I love the fact, and you just talked about it there, that MLS's history is so much different than what MLS is now that it makes it even more complicated. Whereas the NFL is basically the same as it was 30 years ago. The NBA is basically the same as it was 30 years ago. So how does San Diego FC, does it just represent the next step of MLS, or does it just represent a really special expansion team?
Maybe a little bit of both, right? San Diego have been, and that's fascinating color, John, on your perspective as a San Diego guy into what all this feels like, right? I don't experience that, not being in the city, not being in a market that is. I've only ever lived in Phoenix in my life. We have never experienced that here in the same way. So that's really interesting to me. San Diego is an outlier case in some ways, but also not in others, right? At the opening of that article, I went through some other really strong, or I talked about this idea that there have been other really strong expansion teams in league history, right? There have been some really nice ones. I didn't mention them specifically. St. Louis back in 2023 won the Western Conference, and that was a big deal at the time. Atlanta United when they joined the league, LAFC when they joined the league, setting the still standing points record for an expansion team. There have been a lot of expansion teams, and because MLS is so young, and because there have been so many expansion teams, the gap between the new teams and existing teams is maybe not as large as it feels like it should be, right? In addition to the fact that MLS gives certain advantages to expansion teams, there's the expansion draft, there's allocation money that is allocated to those teams at a greater level. There are unique benefits that you get as an expansion team. But San Diego has still leveled up on all this. And the reason why, if I was a San Diego fan, I wouldn't feel like this is an expansion team is because the team doesn't play like one. The team plays like a team that has played together for years, right? And that is just not the case. BJ Callahan, who's having a great season coaching Nashville SC, and there was a recent game between these two teams that we're talking about. He talked about how San Diego have had to build something with basically 30 people that have never met each other before coming into the season, and how well they have done that. And I get into the reasons for why I think they've had so much success in that story. Man, it is wildly impressive what they've done.
Yeah, and I mean, I think my perspective is a little bit different than John because, I'm one of the guys that has been pushing politically here around town and insulating myself around a lot of Major League Soccer fans or soccer fans in general trying to bring this league into San Diego and then being involved on the USL level as well. But I think we probably are both right based on our own perspectives. Well, let's talk a little bit about the article, how San Diego Football Club is dominating MLS. I do think sometimes, the weight of expectation becomes a thing. It becomes a little bit of a burden, although you'd never know it hanging around the club as much as I do. And I know you've spent some time around the club as well. I've been pointing this out. 4 more wins gets you to 18. That passes St. Louis's record. It surpasses the LAFC points record. So you're running pretty close here with 9 games to go, being considered the greatest MLS expansion side during the regular season of all time. So you're not only competing with Vancouver and Minnesota and, trying to go into the postseason and play these games and be competitive. You're also chasing a little bit of history. From that, I wonder how much deep down these guys are thought that this was a possibility. Tyler Heaps is a very confident human being. Yep. As you know, Joe, you've interviewed him a couple times. I'm around him a little bit more. He's very confident in what it is that he does. Are they good just as an expansion team, or are they just good, period?
Well, they're just good, period, right? And we know that. And it's funny because I haven't asked Tyler Heaps or Mikey Varas or the players this question, but I sort of get the sense that they wouldn't really care too much about where they stand in the pantheon of expansion teams, right? I care because I think it's interesting, and I think they deserve credit for what they've done this year because I am a big admirer of the project. But what I tried to get at in that piece a little bit as well, beyond just the, wow, they are historically great as an expansion outfit, is that they're also really good right now. Like, forget comparing them to St. Louis and LAFC and Atlanta of the past. This team, and Charlotte and all the other teams that have joined recently, this team is a trophy threat now, right? The Shield is going to be tough, but they do have a chance to still end up on top of the regular season standings this season. But more than that, the West is winnable for San Diego, right? They're on top of the West as we're recording right now, although Vancouver haven't beat on points per game. This is a really, really great team, period. And I think that's what San Diego would care about, right? Even though I think it's fun and interesting that they have a really good chance to stack up as the greatest regular season expansion team ever, and maybe something more, right? But it is the most impressive part of all of this is that they are not just good compared to their expansion peers, but really good compared to the field. And to do that right out of the gates is impressive. You talked about Tyler Heaps as a confident guy. He's an immensely confident guy, right? And I'm preaching to the choir here. Look, preseason, I met Tyler Heaps for the first time, and we started chatting. And he said, we're going to be the expansion team with the most in-depth style of play that this league's ever seen. And that's a lot of talk. There was a lot of talk coming out of San Diego and a lot of doubt from even people like me. I think in my preseason predictions, I had them maybe finishing 8th in the Western Conference. Higher than most. Most people had them 14th or 15th. But, I mean, I was still so wrong that I can't even take credit for that, right? Looking at this roster, yes, it was easy to see Chucky Lozano as a game changer, all right? I had a lot of stock in him. Anders Dreyer, I loved the profile when they brought him in, and he's been amazing this season, better than I thought he'd be. Luca De La Torre, slam dunk signing, right? A lot of those guys, Anibal Godoy, there were good pieces. But then you look back further and further, one line after one line, and you're in the defense with rookie center backs and Chris McVie, who has not been a really high-profile player in this league, and Patty McNair, which question mark there. The fullbacks, right, and not a lot of talent in that part of the field, and a goalkeeping group without a starter with MLS experience. And I thought, man, there's going to be growing pains, and there just haven't been. Like, there just really haven't been. I think it's fascinating how much success they've had, how right they were, and all the different elements that have led to that success this year.
But, just taking that one step further in terms of how they're built, because, you can go back to the second, most recent expansion club, which would be St. Louis City, which did set the record for most wins. And again, as Joe said, you have to take this all with a pinch of salt because, not everybody could play as 34 games. So not everybody had the opportunity to win 17, but, records are records. Do you think it's a sustainable thing? Because St. Louis has kind of fallen off a cliff over the last couple of years. Yeah. In what ways do you Should an SDFC fan feel pretty good about the structure and the setup here and the system in place that, this isn't just some sort of one-hit wonder where they took a bunch of clubs by surprise early on. Galaxy was kind of a mess, et cetera, et cetera. Is it more... Do you feel like it's more a little bit along the St. Louis lines or a little bit more along the LAFC lines where this is going to be a sustainable model for years to come? And this isn't just going to be some flash in the pan, okay, bursting out of the gates. And, now all of a sudden, who knows what this is going to look like in a couple of years?
It's a great question because it is the question for San Diego right now. I think it is so much closer to the LAFC end than the St. Louis end. The St. Louis this season was so bizarre, right? Soccer is a funny game. It's a low scoring game, which means it's a high variance game, right? If you're only scoring, 3 goals a game on average between the two teams, weird singular events can massively change a game, and it doesn't take many games to massively change a season. St. Louis did a lot of things well in that season. They also were incredibly fortunate with some of the literal bounces of the ball that they got, where they were past the ball. Yes, they were pressing, but teams put together like incredibly poor distribution performances out of the back against St. Louis and handed them goals and own goals in wild moments. And I don't think it was a shock to see that St. Louis were bounced in the first round of the playoffs. Now, playoffs are weird. They're an even smaller sample size. San Diego could get bounced in the first round of the playoffs. In the playoffs, they're designed to make those things possible. So that is absolutely on the table. But when you look at San Diego, what makes me so bullish about them is really 2 things. The first thing, and I won't spend as long here, but it's that the front office has absolutely just dunked the ball on the roster build for this year with the senior players, right? I talked about Dreyer already. He is a superstar. If Lionel Messi wasn't in this league, he would be the MVP this season. So he is amazing. And you look at some of the other profiles, players that even die-hard soccer fans in this continent had never heard of, right? Ani Valakari. And you run through the list of guys that have come in from abroad and have been amazing for this team, right? Valakari, I know, is a rotation option in midfield, but he started games at the 9, he started games a little bit wider, he started games deeper in midfield. He's checked so many boxes. You look at the defensive pieces that have played really well in this setup that did not come in as glamorous names. The fact that the front office has nailed the initial roster build should give everyone confidence that they will do well in the future. It's not a guarantee, but it's a pretty good bet. The other thing, and this is the thing that makes me even more bullish on them, is San Diego's ability so far to spot young players and their commitment to wanting to develop more young players, right? With the Residency Academy and their academy that's not even fully built out yet. They're still in the top half of the league in terms of the youngest teams based off average age weighted by minutes played this season. They're a young team this year, and they're getting performances from these guys. They've gone and found Luca Bombino and Oscar Verhoeven, and they found now Pedro Soma and David Vasquez and players that I rate very highly. And they brought them into this group with the pitch of, we're going to play you. And now imagine when San Diego has stated this goal already, I think it was Tom Penn talking to ESPN, maybe it was another executive, my apologies, that they want to have the most, they want to spend more on the academy than any team in Major League Soccer, right? That is part of the San Diego FC vision. That's part of the Right to Dream vision. If you want to have sustained success in MLS, and we see this in Philly, which is the example that Tyler Heaps used to me, but you see it in Seattle now as well, maybe a few other markets. If you want to have sustained success with a league that has a salary cap, that means you can only spend so much on most of the players on your roster. A great way to do that is by finding good players that are cheap. And the primary category of players that are cheap is young players, right? You can sign them to homegrown contracts. You get cap benefits for doing that. MLS wants to incentivize its teams to develop young players. San Diego know that. And Heaps basically straight up said to me, if we want to have sustained success in this league, we want to do what Philly's doing. We want to develop homegrowns and supplement our roster, our senior players that, yes, we have to hit on, right? Those are important players to nail signing-wise. But we want to supplement those guys, and maybe even more than supplement them. We want to surround them with talented young players that we're developing in our system and our model that we think have a future at the highest levels of this game. I see the beginnings of that now, and the academy's not even built yet. So I think there is a lot. Not that there won't be hurdles and setbacks and all those things, of course, but there's a lot to be excited about if you're a San Diego fan.
So just a quick follow-up, because part of that, if that is going to be your structure, on the other side of that structure about finding, identifying the talent, bringing it in, signing it, developing it, playing it, having success with it. And you're right. I think it was Tom Penn who was talking to Taylor Twellman where he said, we want to be the Ajax of North America, which I think for a lot of people, Joe, and I don't mean to sound dismissive of other people's knowledge of the sport, I don't know that that's something that everybody's like, oh, yes, the Ajax of North America. Amazing. What a concept. I don't know that everybody's like, yes, that's exactly what we want to be. But, those of us that follow the sport are like, yeah, that's pretty ambitious. The flip side of it, though, is that the Ajax of North America means that when those players reach a certain level and you can turn a profit on those players, you're going to do that. And you're going to sell those players for 6, 7, 8 figures potentially, and you're going to reinvest that money, right? So it's going to be this churn. How do you think our soccer culture in the States, I won't limit it just to San Diego, but how do you think the soccer culture in the States is ready for that, to say, like, this is going to become a little bit of a factory where you're going to squeeze out as much success as possible, and then, then what happens is you have the opportunity to sell a player. You sell the player, you make a profit, and you reinvest it back into another 14-year-old somewhere that nobody's ever heard of. Like, I understand that model. I understand it. You understand it. I think a lot of people listening understand it. I don't know that the majority of people who are sports fans in the U.S. fully would appreciate that. But how ready do you think we are for that kind of model if it's proven to be successful?
Yeah, maybe a little more ready than you think, but you raise a good point, Darren, which is that as American sports fans, we're used to being the best, right? We call our champions world champions when they're not technically world champions, right? There's that whole discussion. So it is a foreign concept. What's not foreign, though, for American sports fans is knowing that we're not the best at men's soccer, right? That we do know. I think there is, like, almost anybody you stop on the street knows that, right? So I think there is this understanding that, okay, we are still not at the top of the pecking order. But to use the Ajax example, because I love that point, right? If you're a soccer fan, that means something to you. If you're not, it really means nothing to you. Like, what's the mythology here that we're trying to talk about? I don't understand. What Ajax does, though, is they develop talent, yes, but they also win titles, right? They're a huge club in the Netherlands. They're a huge club globally if you're a soccer fan. And it has been proven, although the Ajax do spend a lot of money, maybe more than San Diego wants to be spending on their first team senior players. But it's been proven that if you have the right pieces, you have the right veterans around your young players, and your young players are good enough, that you can win with that. And we've seen it at MLS as well. The Philadelphia Union back in 2022, they have an incredibly successful regular season on the back of a lot of young talent in that first team. They go on and they win they go on and they lose in MLS Cup in wild fashion to LAFC. And yet outside of last season, which was a dip for them, they have been one of, if not the most consistent team results-wise in Major League Soccer. They are always a threat up or near the Eastern Conference, and they are in the lead right now for the Supporters' Shield. I know 2025, it feels like 2022 was a long time ago. It really isn't, and there's been success between those eras. So the model is proven in Major League Soccer that, yes, if you do the other things right outside of just the youth side, winning is not off the table when you decide to become a selling club. And the reason for that more than anything is that outside of, a half dozen clubs across England and Spain and Germany and France, every club in this sport is a selling club because there is always somebody up the ladder with more money than you until you get to those clubs that I just referenced. So it's possible. It's weird. It's a weird concept for an American sports fan, but we see it and we see successful examples of it in this league.
I saw someone the other day, a very generous San Diego FC fan, saying about Milan Alaski getting, going to Philadelphia Union, that if you view San Diego FC and FC Northland as being one organization, San Diego FC just got $1 million from a rival MLS team for Milan Alaski, which, I mean, you're stretching a little bit there, but I get it. This is going to bring me to my other point, which is I was debating I still probably will, if in the offseason I should try and follow FC Northland. And then I was like, which one is like the major league club and which one's the minor league club? And now all of that is getting turned upside down because I read your article about Don Garber saying that MLS is probably sometime soon going to line up with the European calendar. And A, that makes it harder for me to follow these two teams at the same time. But B, it makes me concerned as to how that would even work, because there was a quote in your thing where Don Garber said that the league's owners would have to get some of their facilities climate ready. I looked up all the MLS stadiums that are open and do not have roofs or retractable roofs and what their average low winter temperatures are. And there's 12 of them where their average low winter temperature is below freezing. That seems like, before you came on, Darren was like, they play soccer in the cold in Europe all the time. But like below freezing feels different to me. Maybe it's not. Maybe that's my American exceptionalism. How do you envision this happening? Because they can't make those 12 stadiums all have retractable roofs, right?
Yeah. First on the Nordsjælland thing, I'm in great company. Like if we're talking about going and watching, following a Danish soccer team during the MLS offseason, I'm amongst great friends here. So I love this so much. That's right up my alley. On the MLS calendar front, yeah, there's a lot of work to do. right? There's a lot of facilities to change. There's a lot of scheduling formatting to iron out. There's a lot of, forget the stadiums, right? Although that is a part of this, right? And even just the training facilities. I was talking with Ernst Tanner, sporting director of the Philadelphia Union, for a story that went up on Backheeled earlier this season. And I asked him, what do you think of the idea of changing the calendar? And he didn't seem quite so gung-ho about the whole concept. But one thing he referenced was, if we're going to train through the winter, we need to change our training facilities and how those are structured and heating and all these like very real logistical hurdles that MLS and its teams have to overcome. And they affect some teams more than others, right? San Diego could do this tomorrow and it wouldn't make any difference for them, right? Yeah. I mean, maybe the Snapdragon availability changes. There's right. There are some things there, but they could do it tomorrow effectively.
Yeah.
But a lot of these teams could not. And this is, I would imagine, along with, okay, how do we strategically want to place ourselves in the American sports calendar? Because that's a huge concern. Like for MLS, building up national TV ratings is massive for them. And it's been a pain point forever, for as long as the league's existed. But if you're looking at just the logistical elements here, how you pull those things together is a huge question. And I don't have a good answer, John. One thing that we will see, I'd have to imagine, is a winter break, right? Germany takes a winter break in the Bundesliga, but it's not very long, right? I think the MLS one might need to be longer. So what this looks like really is still anybody's guess. What it does sound like, though, is that MLS has some ideas and that it maybe is going to be different. Don Garber at least teased it as different and a creative format that they're working on that it sounds like they're really in the thick of finalizing at the moment when they eventually come out and announce this move after another Board of Governors meeting or however long it's going to take. But it's a big question. And beyond just how do we do it, is it a good idea to do it is also part of this because you are then lining yourself up with more of different American sports that are much more popular here in the United States. MLS does like how their playoffs, assuming the playoffs would be, basically in the May timeframe, how their playoffs maybe would have a little less conflict / entirely less conflict with American football, across college football and the NFL. That I think has a lot of attraction to MLS. But you're running into the real meat of the NBA season there as well, right? So you got to pick your poison. And MLS thinks that it is going to trend in that direction. But there's a lot of stuff for them to iron out before they actually jump there.
I just want to go back to another point John brought up about Milan Olaski, Joe. What's your read on what happened there?
Yeah, I mean, by all accounts, it sounds like Milan Olaski said, hey, I've scored an absurd number of goals in an absurdly small amount of time. I would like a new contract. And San Diego said, okay, we're happy to give you a little bit more money. And he said, I'd like more money than that. And they said, no, thank you. And so he goes back to Nordsjælland and explores other opportunities. And Philadelphia come in and say, hey, we're going to have some holes up top really next season. And also we quite like you for our trophy push where they've got 3 trophies still on offer, US Open Cup, MLS Cup, Supporter Shield. We will pay you a moderate amount more than, well, maybe more than a moderate amount more, probably 4 or 5x what you were making before as a really low budget player. And that's going to be San Diego's model, right? San Diego are, when it comes to their senior players, they're going to be careful with how they spend. They are going to want you to prove it over a larger sample size than Olaski proved it. For as productive as he was, and they're gonna be okay with those kinds of decisions. It might be a bad decision, but I think they would say we would rather spend that money on our academy facilities and all these other things where we want to really invest, and we'd rather spend it on a guy that has a larger sample size, who's going to be a little bit more affordable with a maybe lower ceiling, but somebody that we feel more confident in and ride that way. I think that is going to be San Diego's MO. How it turns out, though, I don't know, but I'm intrigued. That's for sure.
I just do want to be quick here because I know we're taking up a lot of your time.
Oh, no, it's all good.
At least this transfer window, we have seen Vasquez come in, Harangi come in, Soma come in, who you referenced there before. These are 3 teenagers who are coming through the door. I keep looking at that under-20 World Cup at the end of September, wondering what it's going to do to our roster for some pretty important games. But obviously, if those guys get the opportunity, you'd be thrilled for them. Most recently, it's been Corey Baird. Any thoughts on what Tyler Heaps has done during this transfer window?
Yeah, San Diego seemed very content to stick with that two designated player model, right? I don't think there was ever going to be a chance of them adding another senior star to this team, which is a little bit of a shame in some ways. Like it would be a lot of fun to see one more piece added to this group, but I think San Diego are probably pretty close to done. That is just me kind of reading the tea leaves here because I don't think they don't want to be this crazy, splashy, first-team roster, spendy kind of team, right? They're okay to be a little closer to the middle of the road. And when middle of the road looks like signing Anders Dreyer and Chucky Lozano, that's a pretty good place to be, all things considered. But I do think that they want to continue to amass talented young players. And they are going to be, you mentioned that U20 World Cup, and then that's a great point. I would be surprised. It would go against their ethos if they stood in the way of players going to that tournament, right? They have a right to do so, but I don't think that would fit the MO of this club. They want to be a youth-driven club, and that looks like giving your players opportunities in the shop window that is the U20 World Cup, and all these kids know that, and all their parents and agents know that too.
Well, especially Mikey, right? As the former
100%.
manager of the under-20 team.
100%.
Like, he knows that more than anybody.
Yep, and Tyler Heaps himself, having worked at U.S. Soccer. There's tons of ties there that I imagine everybody would like to continue for the foreseeable future. So I don't think we'll see a lot more from San Diego. I mean, maybe there's something that's out there that I don't know about. But I also don't know that if they can get a little healthier than they've been the last stretch here, I don't know that they need a ton more, right? You're getting some nice production now out of Tomas Angel up top, former Phoenix Rising player, Tomas Angel, I might add. You hope to get a little healthier up top and at the back. And all of a sudden, when you're getting legitimately good performances from two rookies, and Ian Pilcher and Manu Dua at center back, right? Dua, a converted center back now. And you're getting, even more young, talented center mids, and Vasquez is a bit of a tweener between winger and center mid, and adding reinforcements at fullback. Man, I don't know that San Diego need to do a lot more to be a real threat. Could they? Yes. Do they absolutely need to? I don't think so.
I have one last question that is tied to the youth on this roster that you were just talking about. You did just invoke the name Manu Dua, who I'm obsessed with, but I don't think he's a part of this conversation. Okay. I did look this up. The MLS no longer has a Rookie of the Year award. They have a Young Player of the Year award. And crazy enough, there is no place in the world that has betting odds on this. So do you, as a person who follows the entire league, think that any of SDFC's young players should be considered for the Young Player of the Year award, assuming that they play about the same throughout the rest of the regular season?
Oh, it's a great question. I'm trying to think on the fly here. I also am, I guess I'm intrigued, John, how obsessed you are with Manu Dua or what that means. I hope it's positive.
Oh, very positive.
Okay,
very
good.
Positive.
I'm buying my stock at him, with him at center back. Looking through, I just pulled up the San Diego's roster to fully refresh my mind here. I think we mentioned basically all of the youngsters on this team that have played real minutes this year. I don't think so. My answer is I don't think a San Diego guy is probably going to end up with that award. Because, and this has kind of been the San Diego way outside of Anders Dreyer and Lozano, it's been a by committee thing, right? Where, maybe the strongest argument would come from Bambino. I've been really, really impressed with, and you're starting to get some European interest in him. I don't expect that to slow anytime soon. Maybe Bambino, but it's hard to get the voters behind a left back, I think, for this sort of thing, right or wrong, and I would say that's wrong. But it is difficult to convert people in that way. I don't know, I don't remember off the top of my head what the age cutoff for Young Player of the Year is. But I think for San Diego, it is a testament, yet again, to how good this team has been as a collective that they are in this position. I know that's kind of a boring answer, but that's kind of really what I feel here. I imagine there'll be some other young player out there from Charlotte, the U22 striker that's banging goals for them, Idan Toklamati, a couple other, Alex Freeman, right? Guys that have broken in with the national team at the senior level a little bit more. That will probably be tilted that way. But I would imagine, I love that you asked this question, John. I would imagine that for most of the years in the next decade / maybe forever, right? I don't know, until the earth falls into the sun. That will be a reasonable question to ask about San Diego.
Yeah. I would say Bambino for me, just having seen every minute of all these matches. I would nominate him if they were asking me for my opinion. And Anders, certainly for me, like you said, as long as this league has Messi, he's probably going to be the favorite for MVP. But newcomer of the year, I certainly think he's probably the favorite for that award as well. All right, I'll ask my final question, because you did interview Tyler Heaps from the Coachella Valley Invitational. An incredibly helpful, in-depth interview just about the structure and style of SDSC. Everything he said about not wanting to play 50-50 balls, etc. We've seen this play out about possession, right? People keep asking me, are they tired because they have a short roster? The style they play lends itself to not being as gassed, perhaps, as if you were playing a different structure, etc. But one of the great questions I thought that you asked, Joe, was about Chucky Lozano. And you brought up the first designated player signing in history. And there is still, every time he gets the ball at his feet, there is an ooh and an ah inside of Snapdragon Stadium. He's incredibly popular. I was at his unveiling, his introduction at the Rady Shell. 10, 11,000 people showed up. I mean, I want to be clear. I'm not at all saying that I don't fully appreciate the popularity of Chucky Lozano, but I love the question that you asked to Tyler Heaps, because you said he was signed before you were really officially the sporting director. And I thought it was really, right? That was a great question that you asked. And you said, something along the lines of, how does he fit in with all these things that you want to do? And he started talking about, well, where we are in the country, this is important for us to get this kind of player. Yes, 100%. Everybody understands that. This league really coveted Irving Lozano for a long time. So he kind of went like, boom, boom, boom. And then he said, oh, yeah, and the football's really good, too.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was like and it wasn't taking away. I don't want to be misrepresenting the thing that Tyler said or that you wrote, but I just thought it was such an interesting question and an interesting answer. When you asked him that, you were the one that was standing there with him, if I remember correctly, under the shade out there in Arizona.
Merciful shade. I'm pale, so the shade was key.
Yeah, I didn't get the sense that he wouldn't have signed him, but that there were, that this was a multifaceted signing that was in the best interest of the business and the football side. And maybe it's generous, it's 50-50, but maybe the scale leans one way or the other. But that this was just a really well thought out signing that had a lot to do with football and a lot to do with a lot of other things.
Yeah, I imagine Tyler Heaps would be pretty grateful that Chucky Lozano was at this stage of his career at this moment, because I think sort of the undercurrent of what he's saying there is we were going to go sign a player like Chucky Lozano. If it wasn't Chucky Lozano, we were going to go sign a Mexican international to be a part of this team, right? Ideally, a good one, right? And a very good one. And I don't think San Diego would have gone after, a player that has clearly been past it in their career. And I mean, they wanted to make a real splash, right? That soccer fans and San Diego fans were not going to see right through all the way. But Lozano was at the perfect moment of his career where things had sort of quieted down for him in Europe, and he'd kind of done what he wanted to do, and the appeal of making a lot of money in MLS and living in San Diego is pretty strong. I'd have to imagine I wouldn't hate being faced with that challenge myself. So there is an undeniable, and I appreciate that Heaps didn't try to deny it, like a business part of this. He straight up talked about that, right? Like, this is a business. And earlier on in that piece, or later, I don't remember when it was, he talks about how we need to sell tickets, and how they play is going to be part of that, and who they sign right off the bat is going to be part of that. It will never be as important for San Diego to do a Chucky Lozano signing. It will never be as important in the future as it was in that moment. I would imagine San Diego will try to continue to pull players that are going to appeal to the Mexican American population, right? I mean, it would make a lot of sense. We're seeing this with Heung-min Son in LA right now with how amazing that can be and how transformative that can be for a community. But I imagine in the future it's going to look more like, hey, we're bringing in homegrown players that can make these communities feel represented in a beautiful way. They're going to see more and more of that. But I appreciated the candor from Heaps. He didn't deny it. Like, this is a player that we were going after, and there's a lot of reasons for that. The off-field stuff is very real, but also we really believe in the on-field side of things. And that was something that I think was pretty clear to see that he had something left in the tank. Chucky Lozano, what's impressed me so much about him this year is, yes, some of the offensive contributions are there, and he's performed at a good level in that way. But man, defensively, he presses. Like he's engaged defensively. And that is just not true of a lot of players of Chucky Lozano's stature. When you look at just the finances, right? You can scroll through the MLSPA salary release and see what these guys are making. Chucky Lozano's making a lot of money. And other players that are making a lot of money are doing a lot less without the ball than he is. And that is a credit to the buy-in that San Diego have fostered, and that's a credit to Lozano too.
Yeah, and I think it's fair. Like, the best might still be to come for him.
Yeah, could be.
Season two.
Could be.
Yeah, for sure. Before we let you go, I did just want to say thank you in this regard, and I felt it in my brain there, the context. I have been waiting for someone to do kind of like a film study on SDFC to give me a better understanding of what I'm looking for outside of just following the ball and the passing and everything. And you laying out the like third attacker, third option, and how that works. That was in my head last night when they were scoring goals against Mazatlán. And I was like, hey, there it is. There's the thing.
I love it.
Thank you so much for giving me that understanding. Like, in all honesty, I subscribed to Backheeled so that I could read these things for this interview. And
that's great.
I was planning on canceling before the trial's up. I'm not going to anymore because this is making me a smarter soccer fan, football fan as well. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, man, I love that. I mean, first of all, that's just the world we live in on the subscription fund these days. So I totally understood. Yeah, that's the thing that's really popped to me watching San Diego this year is how, they do so many amazing things on the ball. I just have to say his name because I feel like if I'm on a San Diego show or on basically MLS show, I want to. Jeppe Sverskov is unreal. Like, he is an amazing player. I chatted with him in Austin at MLS All-Star, and some of his context and quotes were in the piece. He's amazing. Like, they have so many amazing players on the ball who can do dazzling things. Dreyer, Lozano, Sverskov, Anibal Godoy is sneaky good on the ball, right? You run through the list. But what makes San Diego, I think, so dangerous in possession is how good those players are at finding space off the ball, right? Because if I'm a great passer and I'm trying to pass the ball to John, but Darren is standing between us. It doesn't matter how great a passer I am, I can't find you. But if John is savvy enough to move off the ball and find space, then we have limitless options available to us. And San Diego have clearly preached those principles to their players. They found players that have a lot of soccer smarts too. And it shows up with some of those third man runs. And there's so much other tactical goodness with this team that I'd love to dig into. But I didn't figure 5,000 words on San Diego was maybe the right play. But it has been a blast to watch this team and to try to digest some of the things that they're doing.
Yeah, and I mean, and it is, when you see it in play, when you see those defenders just stubbornly, literally will put their boot on the ball and say, we are not moving here until one of these players comes our way, so one of our other guys can find a little bit of space behind that guy, and then it's like boom, 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 down the field they go. Like it is something you see on the training ground. It is something that you then see in action, and when you see it against a club like Mazatlán, which came in with a lot to lose and lost a lot, eliminated after last night, like it is. I love when you actually see the things that they're preparing for when you see them in play and doing, being the second voice in the broadcast booth. Sometimes you get distracted because you're looking at all these other things, trying to figure out where the run is coming from. And you're like, oh, who was it that even made that pass? I don't know. I was looking at the runner on the far side of the field. Hopefully the replay, Anyway, that's my cross to carry. Joe, we've taken up a ton of your time. People can follow you on social media. Joe C. Lowery, that's Blue Sky. That is also on X. And where else can people find your work, if not for Backheeled.com?
Yeah, Backheeled is a great spot. You can hear me on the Total Soccer Show, which I love doing that show with my buds. And if you ever feel inclined to turn on a Phoenix Rising game, you will hear me on all the Phoenix Rising home games as well.
I love that. I still do check in on my USL.
Hate watching's fine. Maybe it's healthy. Like, you can hate watch. I'm here for it.
Hey, I had a great time covering the USL. I will say, and I'm still bullish, even though I'm now with SDFC. I'm still bullish on lower division soccer.
Sure.
I am very much and remain convinced to this day. People keep asking me like, oh, that time with the USL, come on, that really wasn't. I'm like, no, like it's important for the future of the sport in this country that we have quality lower division soccer. But that's its own separate podcast, I suppose. Joe, we appreciate it. Thank you very much for taking the time to do this.
Hey, thanks, guys.
All right, again, thanks. And as John just said there, and as John just admitted, you can sign up for a 3-day trial. And if it piques your interest and you want to hang around a little bit, you want to learn a little bit more. I mean, for me, this was something that I just considered essential from my role with SDFC, even if it was only going to be a handful of games, which I didn't know when the season started. But even I go to their season previews. I've used many of the tidbits that I've read during the season previews during these broadcasts. So I don't know that's not plagiarism, is it? I don't think so.
I don't think so. Bigger question for me is, have you ever or will you now hold it against Tomas Angel that he was part of that Phoenix Rising team?
No, I think we were gone by then. But I know Tomas seems to be the one who, he's a tease because he can do some things. And he can make you be a believer just watching him do a handful of the things that he does.
I know.
But, that was an opportunity missed, I would feel like, for Tomas in that one last night. He did play the full 90, which there's something to be said. But now with a little bit of midfield depth coming up on Saturday, opportunity to put Valakari in different positions, I'm curious to see what it looks like coming up this week. All right, so thank you again, Joe C. Lowery, Lowery, on Blue Sky and on Twitter. And when people come on the show, we love to support independent journalists and independent media. And Backheeled is one of those. So hopefully this will pique a couple of people's interests in what it is that Joe and his colleagues are doing over there at Backheeled.com. John, I meant to ask this yesterday.
Go ahead.
Do you have one more thing before we
I was just going to say, we've been neglecting the mailbag on the Discord server, so I was going to throw a mailbag question at you, but you had a question for me
not
first.
the F, Marry, Kill one, ours, is it?
I mean, we could do that.
I was answering some Discord chat questions last night. I got asked a question by Sonny Fono about whether or not the clubhouse attendants for Major League Baseball teams have to clean all of that pine tar off the batting helmets before they travel. Fortunately, I have a couple of clubhouse attendants that I could text, and I got the answer to that one. That's a Discord exclusive. If you become a subscriber to Section 1904, That's the kind of access that you get only on the Discord channel.
I had an assumption as to what the answer would be, but I didn't want to give it myself. And then you got the actual answer, and it was just what I assumed. So that made me feel good.
I had to redact a name though, because I didn't say that I was going to put it for publication.
Yeah, that's fair. You had a question for me?
No.
Just before that? Okay. I think we should tackle at least one question from the mailbag. This is one person asking what kind of like stats they get. I'll answer that one on the Discord because I can show screenshots and stuff. Do you want the F, Marry, Kill question? Because we've been avoiding it. Or do you want a different one?
Different one.
Okay. Let's see. We answered this one. What's the Leagues Cup? We're past that one. That shows you how long we've been waiting. This person asks, any thoughts on the Baja 1000? I don't really have any. Do you?
I don't, but isn't that what Brad Pitt's character was going to race in after his success at Formula One?
Yeah, so this is how the guy asked. He said, any thoughts on the Baja 1000? You guys have been talking a good amount about F1 and NASCAR. Let me put it this way. I'm not even sure if talking about who wins is worth it. It's more like go to Ensenada, eat some fish tacos, drink some tequila, and look at the Volkswagen Beetles and trophy trucks for a few minutes, then back to the tacos and tequila. That sounds like a good Darren Smith trip if I've ever heard of one.
Yeah, sign me up. When is it?
That's a great question. He did not provide that information, and I did not look for it. The other questions are just kind of sprinkled in here, and some of them we answered. Actually, here's a good question that I answered on the Discord, but you did not. Do you have any thoughts on the NFL acquiring 10% of ESPN?
I understand the criticism of it all, but yeah. I feel like we've already crossed the Rubicon on ESPN being in business with a lot of these sports. So, it's Bob Lee is no longer works there. It's been a long time since Bob Lee worked at ESPN.
Right.
What does this mean for a guy like Don Van Natta? Don Van Natta does a ton of journalism. I think he's still an ESPN employee, but he is the guy that I would identify. He's written books. He's done a lot of investigative work into Jerry Jones, et cetera, exposed a couple scandals. What does this mean for him and his future? Probably not great. On the other hand, so it's all distasteful, but I just don't find myself surprised by it because I feel like these roads have been paved for a while with other sports, and now it is with the most popular sport in the United States. What I will say, though, just on the flip side is if this is concerning to anybody because it is furthering the erosion of journalism, let's give a little bit of credit to Pablo Torre from Pablo Torre Finds Out, who's been doing great independent journalism and just within the last couple of days got rewarded, John. I don't know, did you see this? That he got rewarded. He is signing a deal. He is working with Meadowlark Media, Dan Le Batard's creation. He was doing a podcast called Pablo Torre Finds Out, which at times had been silly. Other times had been a little bit more serious. Pablo Torre just signed a 7-figure deal with The Athletic, the New York Times, to be doing journalism. So he has taken this really, really unique concept, and he is being rewarded for all of the hard work that he is doing journalistically and is going to be making a lot of money to do this independent of having to have tie-ins with different leagues and different networks. So good on him.
Yeah, I actually I kind of saw this report coming out before it even got publicized. And I was like, that's interesting because he already works for Meadowlark Media and they're a production company. And why can't he? And then I saw in one of the reports, it said that Pablo was uncomfortable with the idea that his reporting on said leagues and whatever would be sponsored by DraftKings. Because remember, Meadowlark Media is everything they do is sponsored by DraftKings. They got dozens of millions of dollars from DraftKings to do this. And I thought that was really smart from him. Just be like, I don't want to be associated with anything or anyone. I want the freedom and the independence to cover these stories the way that they deserve to be covered. And that was really cool. Two other questions that maybe we can answer on like Friday. One of them was, what are your future plans for Section 1904? That's a big question with a lot of answers. And the other is, any thoughts for a meet and greet night? And the answer is yes, but we need more details around that. So maybe we'll talk about those things on Friday.
Okay. I think that those are both questions John and I will have some common answers about the future plans, and I think we will have some different ideas as well. So,
Yep.
yeah, those are good questions. And we are tinkering with things every single day. It's not just front row seat, the newsletter delivered to the inbox, but other ideas incorporating a little bit of video. Even though early on we're like, hey, to hell with video, we're not going to use video. Then it's like, well, video is a pretty good promotional vehicle. So maybe we're going to use a little bit of video. I saw my clip got passed around a little bit yesterday on Twitter, me poking fun at the number 6 ballpark in the U.S. But, again, it just is, if you're going to put it in there, like, what is your standard for that? There is no standard.
Section 1904 is number 1 ballpark.
I like that idea as well. I just don't think I'm just always going to kick the can down the road on the F, Marry, Kill question.
Okay.
Because there's no right answer.
I put thought into it. I don't remember what thought I put into it, but I put thought into it at one point, and I was like, this is going to be my answer. And that question was asked a week ago. And I was like, all right, here's my answer for when we talk about it on the pod. I've totally forgot. But F, Marry, Kill with Kaplan, Cilio, and Hacksaw. Like, there's no winning. There's no winning.
There's no right answer.
Yeah. 3 bullets.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think, like, through this, the least... What's of the F and the Marry and the Kill? Like the kill thing. Yeah, I mean...
This was okay. No, I remember my thought process. My thought process was I would marry Hacksaw because he's significantly older than me, so that wouldn't last very long. And Kaplan seems like he would be a sensual lover, so I'll give him the F and get Cilio the hell out of the way. That was my thought process.
Okay, I feel like that could be valid. That probably is the way that I would align this as well.
Okay,
maybe Saw's got a little bit of money.
One would hope.
Then again, living through like this chaotic universe of Cilio might be fun as well. Right? Maybe you just say like, hey, enough. I cannot listen to a lifetime of Hacksaw telling me these stories. So maybe he would be the K just out of mercy. And then maybe being on this insane ride with Cilio would be the Marry thing.
He's never going to be home. He's always going to be out doing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
maybe that's.
I've spent a lot of time around Kaplan though, and know a lot about him from different generations, and yeah, I think there's a little bit. I don't know, sensual. Okay, I think that's one word, but there might be a little freaky deaky to that game too.
No, I mean, of
but
course
there's no right answer with the other guys.
No, there's no right answer with any of them.
Plus, I don't know that this needs to be answered in a literal sense.
No, definitely not a literal sense. But yeah. Kaplan is the best of the bunch, I think. Yeah.
Well, anyhow, that's as far as I'm going to go on that.
I got you to answer it, though. I feel proud about that.
Well, I just that's as much time as I plan on spending on this question. But thank you for the very thoughtful question.
I believe that was your buddy Sonny Fono, who you referenced earlier. Yep, that was his question. So he gets a good one.
There is
a
a mailbag tab on the Discord channel, so fill it up with some good questions, and we'll answer them. All right,
please.
Thank you. We'll do it again Thursday.